When Paul visits Corinth, he likely walked through this ancient street that leads all the way from one of Corinth's ports, Cenchrea, all the way down this street to the other port of Lechion. Paul also set up shop here to work in between the Sabbaths when he was preaching. All of this vast, well-preserved marketplace had shops, individual shops for people to sell their wares and to share ideas, because of course the sharing of goods and commerce was always part of the sharing of ideas. And so Corinth became a place that was a cross-currents, an intersection of culture. Now imagine that Paul could very easily have been working with Aquila and Priscilla in one of these very shops on the side of the road. Now this gives you a location for their work, but it also gives you a location for something else. Above us is the temple of Apollo, and beside us is another shrine for Apollo. You see, Corinth was known as much for religion and the cross-pollination of religious ideas as it was for the commerce that came from being a major port. Paul was addressing a number of issues in the books of Corinthians that really came out of the marketplace. It's not so much that he was working here as it was that he was surrounded by temples. There's a water element here dedicated to a god, and then up on the Acrocorinth, a temple to Aphrodite. This was a ritually complex site. Lots of gods, lots of deities, and lots of shrines. And here's the problem for the early believers. Should they, in the market, buy meat that had already been offered to idols? That was a key issue for them. And here's what Paul says to them. In chapter 8 of 1 Corinthians, "So then, about eating food sacrificed to idols, we know that an idol is nothing at all in the world, and that there is no God but one. For even if there are so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, yet for us there is one God." And so Paul says, when you eat food, don't think of it as having been sacrificed to an idol, but being a gift from God. This is what Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 10. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So don't worry about the source of the food and what process it went through, because your conscience is clear. In verse 31, whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God, even as I try to please everybody in every way, for I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. So here's the fundamental issue to think about here in Corinth as you make your way around the agora. Surrounded by temples and all the activity, including the commercial activity of selling meat, Paul says, look, as Christians we know there are no other gods, and any meat that's been sacrificed has not been somehow existentially polluted. No, it's free for you. But Paul says the most important principle is that you love your brothers. And so if your brother is offended because somehow your brother thinks you're participating in another ritual, then let it go. This is important to Paul's fundamental message to the Corinthians. Christian liberty is not licensed to do whatever you want. Christian liberty is the freedom in Christ to serve your brothers. And that's what Paul will do in the marketplace. That's what Paul will do in the synagogue and in the church. Paul will take advantage of his freedom to be all things to all men so that he might save some.